so cold my balls are about to retract into me and come out my skull like the deer antlers. And we have a new interview with Yoshi P about Final Fantasy XIV, people. It's from Famitsu. Link will be in the description down below. Hello everybody, it's your Jmulls, and let's get into this. Just as a heads up, I'll be using Google Translate to translate this from Japanese into English because Famitsu is originally in Japanese. So standard protocol, we're going for the intent, we're not going to overly judge specific wording. There's quite a bit of preamble to this interview, like the first question about the actual artwork for the patch itself, which is a nice piece of art, talking about how the name for the Arcadian in Japanese has a specific meaning. For instance, right here, furthermore, Arcadia, the Japanese word for utopia, is a word with a double meaning. You won't understand until you actually play the game, but if you look at it again after completing the main quest and raid story, I think the title will fit in with both. I always like a good bit of recontextualization in my Final Fantasy XIV, so we'll see what that's all about when the content actually comes online. And now for the first question I really want to start to dive into. The interviewer asks, the main story, which will likely be the first step towards the next development expansion. Again, remember, Google Translate here. Will also involve the word utopia. Yoshi P says, the story leading up to the next development doesn't really begin until patch 7.5. So patch 7.4 serves as a bridge connecting the story up to that point. The theme of patch 7.4 was summer vacation for the Warriors of Light. Where have we heard that before? And now that summer vacation is over, it's time to start your final homework and feel like the new semester's about to begin. Okay, I think I see what he's trying to imply here. Look, I know some people have some rather strong feelings about how Dawntrail actually executed on feeling like a summer vacation for the Warrior of Light, but if 7.0 to 7.3 was like us being away from actual school, then 7.4 is us focusing in and preparing for the new year. Okay. Yeah, it's basically just Yoshi P trying to say 7.4 is going to serve as a way to connect this story into the next major arc. It's basically the prologue. I just finished checking and giving feedback on the main quest last night, and I think it turned out to be very cohesive, including the production. While this is somewhat the central focus of the story, the main story theme of patch 7.4 is to bridge the gap to the next story. Glad I went off on that tangent. By the end of the 7.4 story, we'll finally begin to hear about what is the key. Good, it took us like, at this point, it could be 4 patches. And the story of the stars and worlds that lie beyond. Okay, that's, if that translation's actually accurate, that's just him saying the story is gonna be about the shards, which we kind of predicted, right? Like, they've not been subtle about this, but it's cool to at least get some actual hard confirmation about that. That's where it ends, I think. Golden Legacy's Dawntrail. In the original Final Fantasy XIV, a character called the Sage appeared, and the player was more of a bystander. With the rebirth, we created a story where players themselves are the protagonists, and to emphasize that perspective, we wrote a scenario in which the members of the Dawn Guard are torn apart at the end of 2.x. I imagine the actual diction is different for Final Fantasy XIV, whether in Japanese or in English. I know that's the case for like the expansions. So again, reminder, don't get too hung up if some of these words don't feel like they belong. Could just be how it's actually said in the Japanese version of the game, and it could also just be a slight error with Google Translate. So remember when I said Google Translate might make a mistake? Well, it actually repeated text there, so let's move on to the next question though. Rather than starting in earnest on July 4th, this time, it'll end at a point where you feel like it's just begun. That can't be right. Instead, the main story of patch 7.5x unfolds at a furious pace. In the previous 6.x series, we spent a considerable amount of time neatly depicting the stories of the 13th World and Zero, and we felt that the transition to the beginning of the next big story, in other words, Golden Legacy, Dawntrail, was weak. So this time, we're aiming to provide a solid introduction to the next development in 7.5, 7.55, and patch 7.4 is designed to lead directly into that. The story is well organized, and the new characters are unique and have a great flavor, so we hope you'll grow to like them. This I do agree with. I actually really liked the story of Zero and Golbez. I really liked the Endwalker patches. A little bit drawn out on occasion, I think we can all admit. However, overall, I still really like those characters, and I really like the 13th. But I do think not having that patch to like patch and a half worth of prologue that a lot of the previous expansions got did lead to some of the issues that Dawntrail had. I wouldn't say it was the only only thing, right? And I don't think that's what they're saying either, but I think having a good introduction leading into the next big story, we don't have to spend so much time developing every little detail like they had to for Dawn Trail, that can go a long way, just to get us into the thick of it real quick, right? Not KSI. The screenshots released at the 89th PLL left a strong impression with a sweaty Lalafell. That is a crazy sentence. Yoshi P. That Lalafell has become an incredibly good character. Laughs. She's a type of Lalafell that seems like it should exist, but hasn't existed before, so I hope you'll keep an eye on her. Yeah, I definitely think, they even said it before, like on the website, that the patch 7.4 story is basically a cryo story in a lot of ways. Will not surprise me at all if they really bring back the Malala story and put that into the forefront of things for a while. That always felt like them foreshadowing things for down the line when we got there in 7.0, and I think we're starting to see that come into fruition here. This next one is one we kind of expected. I think the new instance dungeon Mistwake, the Forgotten Journey, will likely be visited during the main quest. But will the new trial, basically Doom Train, also be content related to the main quest? Yoshi P. Yes! It's a trial that you take on in the main quest. Glacier Labrador is involved in a major development midway through the story. The more you know about the source of the homage, the more you'll understand the necessity of the fight, the people you need to protect, and the more you'll be impressed with how it turned out. The battle presentation is also quite elaborate, but I think it'll be a bit chaotic if you're taking on the game for the first time, so you might not be able to watch it too closely. Wry smile. Yeah, there's a little disclaimer here. So, the Doom Train fight, the trial guy, this jabroni, he actually comes from Final Fantasy VIII. I actually haven't gotten to the point in FF8 yet where I get introduced to Doom Train, but the little disclaimer here says, Doom Train appears in Final Fantasy VIII as one of the GF, no not girlfriend, Guardian Forces, which are summoned beasts because it's Final Fantasy. It has the appearance of a train, and when summoned, it'll inflict damage on enemies as well as inflict multiple abnormal conditions. Oh goody. Get your Asunas ready. Since the boss is shaped like a train, I imagine a battle similar to the one against the Demon Train in Sigmascape V1 between Dimensions Omega or Vampire Slayer, but will the presentation be different? Yoshi P says, as you said, long time. Final Fantasy XIV players probably have a strong image of train monsters as magic trains, but of course, we're constantly trying new things. I'd like you to play the game for yourself to find out more, but there's a lot to see. I think it's hard enough just to look at the casting bar and the warning signs, but please be sure to pay attention to your surroundings. Also, the battle will take place in a fast-paced area, so please be careful not to fall off. Oh, we're dealing with knockbacks galore. We're about to get rammed so hard. Pause. Next up, in the ID Magical Divine Gate Tower of Babel, what a name, the dungeon begins with a train moving scene, and in the Alliance raid, Battery of Hope Tower, which is crossover content with the Nier series. Give me a part 2! I know I'm like the only person in the world that probably thinks that, but I love the Nier raids. The Blossoming God launches an attack using a train, so it seems like content with a train motif has always been very well crafted. Oh yeah, the Kaine fight. Yeah, I really like that. If you remember doing the Kaine fight, it would summon the train, and you would have machines shooting like little red orbs at you. I always like that visual. There are a couple of other mechanics there as well. Yoshi P says, I think we were able to use the battle stage in an interesting way in the Doom Train Annihilation battle. We've done some pretty impressive things in an online MMORPG, so I hope you'll pay attention to various aspects of the game. Okay, he sounds really proud of this fight. I mean, it's a giant freaking train, right? Like, it has to be cool. I think it's physically impossible for a giant train in an MMO to not be cool besides, like, Grimrail Depot. How do you feel about the difficulty of the Extreme Glacier Labrador battle? Since adjustments are scheduled for Extreme next week, it's hard to say anything at this point, but if I had to say, rather than a battle that requires quick reflexes, it's a battle of logic, where you have to look around carefully and recognize patterns. Oh my god, it's gonna be memorization again, isn't it? Oh! Hey guys, we're gonna show you like 6 things in repetition. Memorize all of them, and then react accordingly. Oh my god, help me. Will the number of totems you can acquire in one battle also be adjusted? Yes. We will decide after discussing the length of playtime and how to make the presentation different from normal. But as I mentioned before, the difference between 1 and 2 is too big, so we plan to reconsider the number of totems dispensed in the future to make it easier to adjust. This is just a preliminary step, so we don't want to be too strict. The next, Extreme, I think they mean Ultimate here by the way, not like an actual Extreme trial, is scheduled to be implemented during 7.5x. This time after patch 7.4 was released on December 16th, Arcadia, the Throne of the Heaven Savage Heavyweight will be released on January 6th, 2026. So there will be a long gap until Savage is released. The reason for this was explained in the 89th PLL, but are the adjustments to Savage taking this into account, as there will be a gap in time, most likely referring to the fact that people will be able to get Tome Gear with the extra delay. Yoshi B, since the time between the release of Savage and the release of our previous even-numbered patches will be longer than usual, players' item levels will be higher than usual when Savage is released. We've made balance adjustments to take into account the increase in item level so that the challenge remains the same for players aiming to clear the first week. We'll see about that one. Please rest assured that these adjustments are not to forcefully make it more difficult due to the gap between games, but rather to keep the challenges normal. For those aiming to clear the first week, there will be no problem as long as you prepare your gear properly as usual. For those who are clearing the game later, the required item level will be higher than usual, so we plan to adjust this using the echo value we will be implementing in the future. Okay, so like later down the line, when people are like trying to do this for the first time, not on release, they'll just give you an echo buff that scales it accordingly. Okay. It seems like there will be many people who will be unable to play all at once during the New Year holidays due to visiting their parents' homes. Losers just play video games, right? That's right, even if you don't want to go all the way through the game, I hope you'll make sure to buy the new equipment and collect the 450 weekly tomestones. With the raid content in patch 7.x we've been creating with the goal of creating more enjoyable battle content that encourages free imagination rather than focusing on difficulty, so I hope you enjoyed the heavyweight raids that were created with that in mind. Hell yeah! Dude, who cares about holidays and spending it with your family? Play some Final Fantasy XIV, hell yeah! Who needs that goofy crap like having a life? Play video games. I support that message. Regarding Arcadia, the Seat of the Heavens, I'm also curious about the story. I'm guessing the Elezen character depicted in the upper left of the patch art is the heavyweight champion you'll ultimately fight. What do you think? I won't go into details, but if they were drawn in this outfit and the characters were facing each other on the first floor, it would be a bit disappointing. This time, as it is the last of the Raid series, which has really been supported by the popularity of the characters, the new characters and warriors are all unique. We've put a lot of effort into making it look like a hot-blooded hero story, but also adding elements of mystery. My prediction, Guy's gonna be like the third fight, and then we'll have a different guy for the fourth fight. But man, I really hope they lean into how wacky this could be. I want the full WrestleMania experience. I want a walk-on song. I want the opportunity to like cut a promo and like trash talk the raid boss before we go in and get wiped by one mechanic because someone doesn't recognize what a stack marker is. It's gonna be heavenly. I believe the 3 people pictured in the bottom left of the yacht are new fighters, and I'm looking forward to the story they will weave. As I mentioned earlier, the release of Type 0 is a little later than usual, so I think you'll be able to take your time and enjoy the story without rushing, so I hope you'll pay attention to that as well. This time the characters, lines, production, and battles are all intertwined to give each warrior his or her own personality. The battles in particular will bring out the individuality of the new warriors, so please look forward to it. Incidentally, battles aren't always one-on-one. There are also tag matches in professional wrestling. The appeal of professional wrestling is that there are villains who use illegal attacks. We're gonna ignore the fact we've been doing like 8v1s this entire time. We've had an entire squad beat up each of these, let's call them contenders, you know what I mean though? I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility for them to call in some backup. The appeal of professional wrestling is that there are villains who use illegal attacks and others who initiate tag matches. Oh yeah, like some point during a boss fight, he just brings in another boss, heal to full. Just because there are 4 of them doesn't mean you'll simply fight each other, or each of them on floors 1 to 4. I didn't say that all the enemies you'll fight are depicted in the patch art. Maybe the statue-like figure in the center is the character you'll face at the end. Laughs. I hope you'll enjoy playing the game and make your own guesses. By the way, has Yoshida-san finished his test play? The normal version has been completely fixed, including the balance, and the Savage version is currently undergoing adjustments. Even after I finish checking the Savage version, we'll continue adjusting the values into the very last minute. The final adjustment for Extreme and Savage will inevitably be made towards the end of the schedule. During the test play of the normal version, how fun did you think the battles were? Considering I'm part of the development crew, they're really fun. Play the game. Like the previous Arcadia, the Seat of the Supreme Being, each floor is completely different in nature, as the third installment in the Raid series, which is focused on the individuality and distinctiveness of the characters, I think it has been completely exactly as the concept. Google Translate coming in clutch there. I didn't want to understand what that meant anyways. I think it is a great level of difficulty for a normal raid. It is easy to clear than the extreme version, you would hope so, but if you are taking on the raid for the first time with 8 people, you may find it difficult, because it turns out randos can be trash. There is still some time until the release of Savage, so I hope you'll enjoy it while taking your time to explore the story. And now for a big one. This is a bit off topic, but I'd like to ask about extreme raids. I'm pretty sure they actually mean ultimate raids here. In the previous interview, you said that the next extreme raid was planned for implementation during 7.x. Since the PLL didn't mention an extreme raid as part of the content to be implemented in 7.4, I expect it will be released in 7.x. 0.5x. When do you think it will be implemented? Yoshi P. The next ultimate, okay, it just uses ultimate there, fair enough. The next ultimate is planned for release in 7.5x. However, it will not be implemented at the same time as 7.5. Kinda figured. This is because we want you to thoroughly enjoy the main story first. That said, there are some people who will take months to complete the ultimate, so we don't intend to delay the release date too much. We are thinking of releasing it a few weeks after patch 7.5. However, this is also a very elaborate piece of content. It's actually Xenos Ye Galva's ultimate, and instead of having an actual fight, you just stand there doing rock, paper, scissors like it's Xenogears. So depending on the implementation and balance adjustments, the release date may be delayed. Even so, we would like to release it at a time not too late in 7.5x. I'm curious about what kind of enemies we'll be fighting in the next extreme. We'll have to wait a while before announcing the next ultimate theme and the type of opponents you'll be fighting. All I can say now is that it will definitely be something that will surprise you with a wow, not World of Warcraft laughs. It's quite new content, and we've had the help of many people, so please look forward to it. It's quite new content, huh? What if it's just like Endsinger Ultimate, and they just ripped the band-aid and said, okay, what if the ultimate is Endsinger, but it transitions at some point where it's separates each of the party members into their own instance, and they have to do a 1v1 ultimate instance against Xenos. And you put that at the very end, and if one person messes up and gets hit, everyone wipes. You can't tell me that wouldn't be hilarious. That would be an ultimate you would have to watch. The next couple of sections were about the variant dungeon and the strategy board, and there's honestly not too much new there except for the strategy board, where you'll be able to save basically 50 of the diagrams there. It's basically Raid Planner, and you can have them on your screen during the actual fight, and as Yoshi P says here, you can also turn the pages yourself. For example, the phases change. So let's switch to this diagram, basically limiting the need to have actual sticky notes in your monitor or to have like a second monitor available for the same functionality. And that they will show actual gameplay with it at the next PLL, which is going to be tomorrow. That I will be live streaming my reaction to, don't you worry about that. And then we get into discussion about Glamour, and Yoshi P actually says, there wasn't too many problems with programming at least when it came to lifting the restrictions on a lot of these Glamour sets. But where Yoshi P was coming from was that, well, I'll just let him say it. When I took over Final Fantasy XIV as a numbered Final Fantasy title, I was an outsider who had been in charge of Dragon Quest until just before that, so I felt more strongly than anyone else that we had to cherish the Final Fantasy worldview. I felt that the way Final Fantasy should be is for Dragoons to be able to equip their character in that style, and to be able to hold their spear and strike the cane pose from Final Fantasy IV. It's the job's identity, so to speak. The core of that feeling hasn't changed much even now. I believe that having operated Final Fantasy XIV for 12 years since A Realm Reborn, the Final Fantasy series has adopted a job system in many titles, and it is precisely because we have been particular about it and because players have an emotional attachment to those jobs that I believe they have been able to play for so long. At the very least, as someone in charge of Final Fantasy, I want to continue to be particular about that. On the other hand, having managed Final Fantasy XIV for 12 years and planning the next expansion and beyond, I believe that while the number of large-scale MMORPGs has decreased since then, the number of online RPGs, including those for smart devices, has increased. And no matter which game you look at, there are very few that have restrictions like Final Fantasy XIV when it comes to enjoying fashion. This isn't to say that each game is free to do what it wants. The number of free-to-play games with microtransaction-based payment services has dramatically increased since Final Fantasy XIV was reborn. If I were the producer of a free-to-play game and wanted players to buy items, I wouldn't impose restrictions on equipment projections, of course. Which just makes sense, because why would you restrict the amount of people that could or would want to actually purchase something? For those who grew up playing other games, some may have wondered, why are there such projection restrictions on equipment for Glamour? When they first started playing Final Fantasy XIV, therefore, this Glamour is just one example. If Final Fantasy XIV is to continue to develop and reach the top as an RPG MMO with the world's most cutting-edge online service, we must consider how to incorporate the current market, player styles, and your sensibilities into our service. This has been my goal and that of the core developers since the beginning of this year. With this in mind, mind, I have been playing various other companies' titles and checking their specifications, and I have come to the conclusion that it's fine to continue to hold onto my own personal principles as a gamer, but this is no longer the time to force them on players. I also play Final Fantasy XIV privately, and since I roleplay my character as a black mage, I don't think I'll glamour night gear. These are my own role-playing rules, so I decided them arbitrarily. However, I reconsidered and thought that it would be pointless to impede the role-playing of people who say, my character is the coolest and cutest in the world, I want to dress up even more. It's fine for me to be particular about my own style, and I'm sure there are many others who feel the same way, but that doesn't mean the system should restrict the motivation of people who are particular about dressing up. Having come to this conclusion, I decided to change the specifications. I think for a game like Final Fantasy XIV, and I've talked about this before, with just how wild and wacky you can make a lot of your glamour sets already, the feeling of your glamour representing the job you were already was kind of out the window. Not fully, right? There were still a few sets that still had that glamour identity for the job, but if you went out into the world like Limsa, a capital city, or go into any raid, chances are most of the people you see are going to range in terms of the aesthetic, and it's not going to just line up with whatever job they are. So I think people, now more than ever for Final Fantasy XIV, would appreciate these glamour restrictions being lifted because it just gives them more tools to be creative when it comes to expressing how they want their own Warrior of Light to look and feel. By the way, when I mentioned this to the development team, they responded, "Are you sure?" Which makes me think the development team also thought that Yoshida's insistence on equipment restrictions is absolute. Wry smile. There was also the opinion that if it was going to be implemented, we should announce it at the fan festival. It's true that a big announcement at the fan festival might elicit a huge cheer. It would. However, with regards to the lifting of restrictions this time, we thought it would be best to change the specifications as soon as possible so that players could enjoy fashion more than ever before. So we decided to make the update with patch 7.4. Just get it out the door quicker, I agree. No need to delay it arbitrarily. Ooh, and this next bit's gonna get a little bit juicy. Let's talk mods, people. Announcing it at the fan festival would have been big news, but you decided to prioritize letting players enjoy themselves earlier than that. Yoshi P replies, yes. By the way, there's one more thing I would like to talk about related to this topic, and that is about mods. While I'm tolerant of modding culture, I believe tools that impede business are absolutely unacceptable. They violate the basic rules of modding, which is to gain the trust of the company and enjoy within that framework. Going beyond that is no longer part of the culture. Based on that belief, I issued a statement regarding several tools, but in response, I received feedback like, it was only because of those tools that I was able to enjoy Final Fantasy XIV. This led to the recent changes to the glamour specifications. I felt that leaving the playstyle up to players rather than restricting it through the system would ultimately prevent the proliferation of tools that impede business. That's one of the reasons I decided to make the update so quickly. In China and Korea, there's been a strong demand for this, and we've been selling replicas of crafter and gatherer gear that combat jobs can equip. We've considered expanding this globally, but we've decided that allowing players to play freely without restrictions is better for the future. Instead, players will need to obtain the original gear themselves, so we hope this will motivate them to try playing crafters and gatherers in order to dress up. This approach applies not only to the Glamour system, but also to all Final Fantasy XIV systems and content, as we're re-examining the fundamental rules, so please don't be surprised if anything happens in the future. While we don't expect Allegan tomestones to disappear, we are also discussing their future. The Glamour changes are just the beginning, and we're currently re-examining everything to improve our service. This is something they've been really honing in on and emphasizing recently, the fact they're willing to basically change core fundamental principles of the game. What this actually turns into in the long run, we'll have to wait for the fan fest in all likelihood. But as someone who has been saying one of Final Fantasy XIV's biggest weaknesses is the fact they're too reliant on tradition. They're too reliant on this is how it's worked, this is how it's always worked, and that's why we're going to keep doing that, and we're not going to take too many risks. I always felt that was one of Final Fantasy XIV's biggest issues. I am glad to see they're going in a different direction. It's risky because they can mess it up, right? But there's also the possibility that they take the game into a far better direction. I want to see how this pans out. The next question is basically, hey, can we ride mounts in town? And then Yoshi P says, well, it's a collision issue. I don't think there's a clear answer as to where we draw the line. Recent games allow you to automatically travel to your destination or warp, and we are currently discussing various things such as whether it will be okay to release auto movement functionality while looking at the specifications of other games. And Yoshi P's basically saying in this final little bit that 7.4 is an update that lets you feel that Final Fantasy XIV is about to undergo changes both small and large in terms of content, systems, and the main quest. This started in patch 7.3 with the deep dungeon, but 7.4 should really feel like that. And basically, his recommendation is say, just don't overthink it, play it, get a feel for it, and they hope you enjoy it. Now, there were 2 other interviews for this. Actually, they come from a Reddit post that congregated a lot of this information here. Looking over the bullet point summations, it's basically the same information from the one interview from Famitsu we just looked at, just essentially reiterated in the other interviews. For instance, in the 4Gamer interview, this is just my browser's translation, by the way, not Google Translate, he even makes the exact same comparison to Kind from Final Fantasy IV when it comes to how a Dragoon should look and feel and act. There is a little something different here in the 4Gamer interview, and it's about the glamour changes. Racial equipment does not fall under we're lifting everything. This is because races are intertwined with the world's lore. No, not the troll wild gods from World of Warcraft itself. The design includes culture, living area, etc. And the team asked, what about racial equipment? I was also asked, let's leave it at that for now. However, I'm thinking of changing the character creation area little by little. So basically, your characters aren't going to be able to glamour into Lalafell gear or Rogadin gear. And I'm also a big advocate for the character creator getting basically an overhaul in my opinion. But Yoshi P says, for example, Elzen and Makode Moonkeeper can have a mole attached to their face in a good position. Brave translate, am I right? We have done a graphic update and now we have more things we can do on the system. So we are also thinking of making it possible to attach moles to races that were not eligible. I think the range of such directions will expand in the future. However, as expected, we are not planning a level where we can attach the horns of Aura to Lalafell, and I don't think we'll do so in the future. All of the players place great importance on the identity of each race. So they're kind of like moving on from like gear being a sense of job identity, but they don't want to move on from race identity in Final Fantasy XIV. Obviously, besides like weapons, because you can't like glamour like a Dragoon Lance into a warrior axe, you can't do that. Moles are cool, sure, okay. For the love of God though, can we get better beards in the game? That's all I'm asking for. In the other interview from GameWatchImpress.co.jp, again translated with my browser, about the MSQ, Yoshi P says, I feel like the more you go near the end of 7.4, the more you'll probably think so. I thought it was a peaceful and good story, so please look forward to it. I think there are some things that everyone is predicting. The ninth world is mixed with the primordial world, probably the source, in a form in which parts are cut out. However, the living memory exists on the ninth world side beyond the Golden Land. So I hope you can imagine what will happen around it and look forward to its release. However, I think you can think of it as a bridge to the next stage rather than a continuation of Dawn Trail. So it seems the location we're going to, almost certainly based on Treno from Final Fantasy IX, will be even deeper into the ninth than just a living memory. And this is something he talked about in the other interviews as well, but I'll just briefly mention it here. One of the big elements when it comes to the Variant dungeon he keeps talking about is how people's IRL time, especially for games like MMORPGs, is getting less and less. Disposable time is now very low in your real world life. Based on this, you will be able to feel the progress in a shorter amount of time, practice each boss carefully, and in the end, you'll be able to take on the challenge of defeating them all at once. Because the middle difficulty mode for the Variant dungeon will allow you to go to any boss you choose, and if you only want to take on one boss there and just leave and get the rewards for that one boss, you can do so. But the highest difficulty mode will have you go through all the bosses in a set order. So if you only have time for like one boss, you do the middle difficulty, do the boss you want, and then leave. If you're like, okay, I want a longer gaming session here, let's either do that middle difficulty and do all the bosses, or go on to the highest difficulty and do them all in that set order. However, although we repeatedly conduct playtests, this kind of right sense of play is inevitably based on discussions on a desk. It's also important to know how welcome this way of playing is until you actually play it. Therefore, the reason we changed the content structure this time is to release the game, receive feedback, and use it as a first step towards providing a better gaming experience. Basically, the Variant dungeon and this structure is them testing out this philosophy and see how people react to it. I imagine if it's very negative, they'll probably go in a different direction, but if people end up really liking this style, they might lean more into it. Yoshi P also recommends that you play the last Variant dungeon before 7.4. If you don't mind. I'll be involved in this main quest a little bit, probably mistranslation from Brave there. It'll be involved in this main quest a little bit, so I think it'll add to the flavor if you do it. And with that, I think we have covered everything that I really wanted to cover with these interviews. Again, I'll leave a link to all of them in the description down below if you wish to peruse them for yourself. And here's where you come in. Leave a comment down below with how you're feeling about the state of the game going forward. Do you like this direction they're going in with 7.4? What do you still think they need to change or address? Or are you just really happy with how things are right now? I'd love to hear your thoughts, hear your opinions, and hear your perspectives. And while you're down there, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. And you know I had to react to some of your hot takes about Final Fantasy XIV. Did Dawntrail even lower the stakes? Well, we got a lot of hot takes to go through. If you want to find out more and suffer through the same pain that I did, you should check out this video right here for more. Stay safe, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again.